Some good news for AT&T customers. The telecom giant saying last hour it restored an outage that started overnight. 75,000 people reporting problems. Customers across the country were unable to make calls, text, or access the internet without Wi-Fi for roughly 12 hours. Company is not saying what caused the outage, but news of the resolution not doing much for the stock. It's edging lower on the day. Joining us now is Hugh Odom, Vertical Consultants founder, president. Hugh, it is good to have you on the show. And maybe you I wanted to just start getting your general take on this event here, Hugh, because this outage, listen, it was widespread. It was national. As we noted there, a lot of people impacted. What's your response, Hugh?
Well, as you mentioned, this has been a crazy morning for AT&T and the other carriers, because usually when you have an outage, it's localized or even regionalized. But when you have a widespread outage, that's a big issue, because you're seeing something that gets outside the control of AT&T. When it gets outside the control of AT&T, you start looking at situations by which somebody outside of AT&T has got into their system. And right now, the wireless networks, the infrastructure, the cell towers, et cetera, are spread too thin with the rollout of 5G. So it exposes this situation even further. And I think this is one of the situations we're going to encounter with this continued rollout of 5G and the underlying infrastructure not meeting up to that demand.
So, Hugh, it's Julie here. So what needs to happen then to prevent this from happening? Is it just growing pains and it's going to happen as 5G gets rolled out? Is there anything that can be done to prevent it?
Well, I think two things. I think one, we have to understand that with 5G, you're going to spread the network and you're going to see some exposure. So you need to really look and see how you can at least know where those exposures are and address them if they do come to fruition of having an issue with them. Second, as I mentioned, we have a lack of cell sites out of the United States to accommodate 5G. That's just a simple fact of it. We are lagging behind the rest of the world. Unless we build out more cell towers and upgrade the ones that are out there, we're going to see this continual issue, both in urban and more particularly in rural areas where you have that spread of coverage. And the big issue there is AT&T recently said they're going to get rid of landlines. And most of rural America depends on those landlines for emergency services. And without wireless service, what do you turn to?
Would you expect, Hugh, the number and severity of outages like this then to actually kind of ramp in the quarters, the years ahead?
I think you're going to see more and more issues because you're seeing more and more traffic on the road, let's say. Equate this to kind of driving down the road and you get more cars on the road and you don't have wider lanes. And when you got more data coming across those internet services, wireless services and networks, you're going to see more and more issues pop up. That exposure gets greater, the traffic gets greater, the overload becomes more a problem. And that just turns into bigger issues like we're seeing today, a nationwide outage. This doesn't really happen that often.
What do you make, Hugh, of how AT&T sort of handled this whole situation in terms of their reaction, their response, their messaging?
I don't think they have had a message. I don't think they've had a response. I think the response is, we're sorry for the outage, but we're not going to tell you what the reasoning was behind the outage. I think that's, the Department of Homeland Security is investigating this. AT&T is to apologize, but no one of the tens of thousands, if not more, of people who've been impacted have got an answer of what happened. And that is an issue because we rely upon communications. It's our fourth utility. And when you shut that down, you can't communicate with people. But also, as I mentioned before, you have an emergency response system that becomes paralyzed because of it.
Not to make light of it, but it's nice to have a break from the phone once in a while, even if it's involuntary. But Hugh, no, seriously though, I know it is very important in a lot of situations. Should they be? Will we see customers leave AT&T? I mean, this is just a one-off, but should they be concerned about that?
I think AT&T and Verizon especially are so far behind T-Mobile, that's my personal opinion, that any bad news is worse news for AT&T. I think that they're trying to catch up. And with this situation, sometimes they say, any news is good news when you're out there. This isn't good news because this says not only do they have an issue with service, it's exposure. And that becomes an issue for security situations when you're using your wireless devices, your phone, et cetera. So I don't think it's a good day for AT&T.
And it seems as though shareholders feel the same. Hugh, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.